A lone rider appears on the horizon of the Central Asian steppe. As the dust settles, the assembled warriors realize this isn't just another soldier. This is a woman, a princess, and she's about to challenge the greatest wrestlers in the Mongol Empire to single combat, with her hand in marriage as the prize. But here's what they don't know yet. She's already defeated hundreds of men, and every single one of them paid her 10 horses for the privilege of losing. Her name was Coutaloon, and by the time her story ends, she would command armies of 40,000 men, reshape the political landscape of Asia, and become so legendary that her tale would inspire stories told 700 years into the future. This is her story, the story the history books forgot. The year is 1260. Across the endless grasslands of Central Asia, the Mongol Empire stretches from the Pacific Ocean to the borders of Europe. It is the largest contiguous land empire in human history, and into this world of conquest and power, a girl is born. Her name is Khutulun, which means bright moon in Mongolian. But there is nothing soft about her destiny. She is born to Kaidu Khan, a direct descendant of Genghis Khan himself. Her grandfather is Ugadai Khan, the third great Khan of the Mongol Empire. She has 14 brothers, 14 princes who should, by all traditions, inherit power while she fades into the role expected of Mongol noblewomen. A political marriage to seal an alliance, a life in the shadows of men. But Kaidu is not a typical father, and Coutulun is not a typical daughter. From the moment she can walk, she is trained alongside her brothers, not as a formality, as a warrior. The training is brutal. Mongol children learn to ride before they can properly run. They learn to shoot arrows from horseback at full gallop. They learn to survive on nothing but dried meat and mare's milk for weeks. They learn that weakness means death. Coutaloon excels at all of it. By the age of 10, she can ride harder than boys twice her age. By 12, she can wrestle grown men to the ground. By 15, she is training with the elite warriors of her father's guard and winning. But here's what makes her different. She doesn't just match the men, she surpasses them. Imagine the scene. A training ground outside Kaidu's camp, dozens of warriors practicing combat, and in the center, a teenage girl throwing seasoned soldiers to the dirt with techniques that leave them gasping for air. Her brothers watch with a mixture of pride and something else, something that might be fear, because they're beginning to realize something that will change everything. Their sister might be the strongest warrior among them all, but strength alone wouldn't make Coutaloon legendary. What happened next would turn her into a figure so powerful that her enemies would tremble at her name. And it started with a decision that shocked the entire Mongol court. By the time Coutaloon reaches adulthood, her reputation spreads across the steppes like wildfire. Stories are told in camps from Mongolia to Persia. The princess who fights like a demon, the warrior who has never been defeated, and Kaidu Khan watches his daughter with growing admiration and growing concern. The political situation is complicated. The Mongol Empire, once united under Genghis Khan, has fractured into competing khanates. Kaidu himself is in near constant conflict with Kublai Khan, who claims to be the great Khan of all Mongols. Alliances shift like sand. Marriages are weapons. Every daughter of a Khan is a potential treaty. Suitors begin arriving at Kaidu's court, princes, generals, wealthy merchants, all seeking Coutaloon's hand in marriage. She refuses every single one. Her father presses her. "You must marry," he tells her. "It is expected. You are a princess of the Golden Family. Your marriage could secure alliances we desperately need." And Coutaloon makes a proposal that will become legendary. "I will marry," she says, "but only to a man who can defeat me in wrestling. And every man who challenges me and loses must pay me 10 horses." The court is stunned into silence. Wrestling is sacred to the Mongols. It is a test of strength, skill, and honor. And Coutaloon is proposing to use it as a marriage contest, a challenge that puts her on equal footing with any man in the empire. Some call it arrogance. Others call it insanity. But Kaidu, after a long moment, smiles. "Very well," he says. "Let the challenges begin." The first challenger arrives within weeks. A prince from a neighboring territory, confident and strong. He brings 10 horses as the wager. The entire camp gathers to watch. The match lasts less than 2 minutes. Coutaloon moves like lightning. She feints, grabs, and twists. Before the prince understands what's happening, he's face down in the dirt, his arm wrenched behind his back. The crowd erupts. Coutaloon stands, barely breathing hard, and claims her 10 horses. The second challenger comes, then a third, then a 10th, then a 100th. Some are skilled wrestlers. Some are powerful men who believe raw strength will overcome her technique. Some are clever fighters who study her previous matches, looking for weaknesses. None of it matters. Coutaloon defeats them all. The collection of horses grows. 10 becomes 100. 100 becomes 1,000. According to Marco Polo, who documented her story, she eventually accumulated over 10,000 horses from defeated suitors. 10,000. But here's what the legend doesn't always tell you. These weren't just victories. These were statements. Every time Coutaloon stepped onto that wrestling ground, she was declaring to the entire Mongol world that she was not property to be traded. She was a warrior, an equal, and she would choose her own fate. The matches become events. People travel for weeks just to witness them. Bets are placed, stories are told, and with each victory, Coutaloon's legend grows. But there's one match that stands above all others. A champion arrives from a distant Khanate, a man who has never lost a wrestling match in his entire life. He brings not 10 horses but 100, a fortune that shows his absolute confidence, and he makes Coutaloon a promise that will change everything. His name is never recorded in most histories. Some sources call him the champion of champions. Others simply refer to him as the one who almost won. He is massive, taller than most Mongols, with shoulders like a bull and hands that can crush stone. He has defeated over 500 opponents in sanctioned matches. He is trained in the traditional Mongolian wrestling style, but also in the techniques of Persian and Chinese fighters. He is, by every measure, the most formidable opponent Coutaloon has ever faced, and he knows it. When he arrives at Kaidu's camp, he doesn't just bring 100 horses, he brings his entire retinue, servants, guards, banners displaying his victories. He makes a spectacle of his arrival, ensuring everyone knows that this is not just another challenger. This is the man who will finally defeat the undefeatable princess. The challenge is accepted, the date is set, and for the first time in years, people begin to wonder, could this be the match where Coutaloon finally loses? Even Kaidu shows concern. In private, he speaks with his daughter. "You don't have to accept this challenge," he tells her. "This man is different. He's a professional wrestler, trained since childhood. There's no shame in refusing." Coutaloon looks at her father with those piercing eyes that have seen 100 victories. "If I refuse now," she says, "everything I've built means nothing. Every victory becomes hollow. Every man I've defeated can claim I only won because I chose my opponents carefully." She pauses. "I will fight him, and I will win." The day of the match arrives. The entire camp empties out to watch. This isn't just entertainment anymore. This is history being made one way or another. The champion enters the ring first. He performs the traditional eagle dance, the ritual movements that begin every Mongol wrestling match. His movements are powerful, confident. He's performed this dance hundreds of times before victory. Then Coutaloon enters. The crowd goes silent. She wears the traditional wrestling outfit, a small vest that leaves the chest and back exposed, heavy boots, and shorts. It's the same outfit every wrestler wears, man or woman. But on her, it carries a different weight. She is not just a wrestler, she is a symbol. The eagle dance begins. She mirrors his movements, but hers are different. Where his are aggressive, hers are fluid. Where his demonstrate raw power, hers show precision. They circle each other. And then the match begins. The champion lunges forward with terrifying speed for a man his size. His hands reach for Coutaloon's vest, seeking the grip that has defeated so many opponents. But she's already moving, sliding to the side with a grace that seems impossible. He adjusts, comes at her again. This time he gets a grip. He pulls, using his superior weight to drag her forward. The crowd gasps. No one has ever successfully pulled Coutaloon off balance before. But she doesn't resist the pull. She uses it. As he pulls her forward, she drops her weight, rotates, and suddenly his momentum is working against him. He stumbles. For just a fraction of a second, he's off balance. That's all she needs. Coutaloon hooks her leg behind his, grabs his vest with both hands and pulls. Physics and leverage do the rest. The champion, all that size, all that strength, all that confidence, crashes to the ground like a felled tree. The impact is so hard that dust explodes in a cloud around them. For a moment, no one breathes. Then Khutulun stands. She extends her arms in the traditional victory pose, and the camp erupts in cheers so loud they can probably be heard in the next territory. The champion lies on his back, staring at the sky, trying to understand how he lost. In less than 30 seconds, his undefeated record has been shattered by a woman half his size. Khutulun claims her 100 horses. She helps the champion to his feet, showing respect to a worthy opponent. And then she does something that surprises everyone. She offers him a position in her father's army. "You are a skilled fighter," she tells him. "Your strength would be valuable in battle. Serve my father and you will have the honor you seek." Some see this as mercy. Others see it as a political masterstroke. By converting her defeated opponents into allies, Coutaloon is building not just a legend, but a power base. The champion accepts, and Coutaloon walks away from the wrestling ground, knowing that she has just proven something that cannot be denied. She is not just the equal of any man in the empire. She might be superior to all of them. But being the greatest wrestler in the Mongol Empire was just the beginning. What Coutaloon did next would take her from legend to legend, because she was about to prove that her skills on the wrestling ground were nothing compared to her genius on the battlefield. Before we continue with Coutaloon's incredible story, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We're uncovering forgotten heroes like this every week. Warriors, rulers, and rebels whose stories deserve to be remembered. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next episode, and drop a comment below. Who's your favorite forgotten hero from history? Now back to Coutaloon's story, because it's about to get even more intense. The wrestling matches made Coutaloon famous, but what she did on the battlefield made her immortal. By 1275, the political situation in Central Asia has reached a breaking point. Kublai Khan, ruling from his capital in China, claims authority over all Mongol territories. Kaidu, Coutaloon's father, refuses to acknowledge this claim. He sees Kublai as corrupted by Chinese culture, abandoning the true Mongol way of life. War is inevitable, and when Kaidu assembles his army, he makes a decision that shocks his generals. He appoints Coutaloon as one of his commanders, not a figurehead, not a symbolic position, a real military commander with tactical authority over thousands of warriors. Some of the older generals protest. She is a woman, they argue. The men will not follow her into battle. Kaidu's response is simple. Watch them. Coutaloon's first real test comes during a skirmish near the Talas River. Kaidu's forces are engaged with a detachment of Kublai Khan's army. The battle is chaotic, cavalry charges, arrow volleys, hand-to-hand combat in the dust and blood. Coutaloon rides with a contingent of 300 horsemen. Her mission, flank the enemy position and create chaos in their rear lines. But as they circle around, they discover a problem. The enemy has positioned a reserve force exactly where Coutaloon planned to attack. If she proceeds with the original plan, her 300 riders will be slaughtered by a force 3 times their size. In that moment, with arrows flying and men dying, Coutaloon makes a decision that reveals her tactical genius. Instead of retreating or forcing the attack, she splits her force. 200 riders continue the flanking maneuver, making as much noise as possible, creating the illusion of a major attack. The enemy reserve moves to intercept them, and Coutaloon, with her remaining 100 riders, circles even wider, moving faster, staying out of sight behind a ridgeline. By the time the enemy realizes what's happening, Coutaloon has positioned her force directly behind their command position. She leads the charge herself, screaming a Mongol war cry that freezes the blood of everyone who hears it. The attack is devastating. The enemy command structure collapses. Officers are cut down before they can organize a defense, And in the chaos, Coutaloon does something that will become her signature move on the battlefield. She rides directly at an enemy officer, a general based on his armor and banners. He's surrounded by bodyguards, but she doesn't care. She charges through them like they're made of paper. And then, in a move that seems impossible, she leans from her saddle, grabs the general by his armor, and literally pulls him off his horse. She holds him against her side like a sack of grain and rides out of the enemy formation, carrying him as a prisoner. The enemy forces see their general captured by a single warrior. Morale shatters. The battle turns into a rout. Khutulun returns to her father's camp with the captured general. When she throws him at Kaidu's feet, the entire army witnesses it. And from that moment forward, no one questions whether men will follow her into battle. They will, because she wins. This becomes her pattern. Over the next 15 years, Coutaloon participates in dozens of battles. She commands forces ranging from hundreds to tens of thousands, and she develops a reputation not just for strength, but for intelligence in warfare. She studies her enemies. She adapts tactics. She understands that Mongol warfare isn't just about charging and overwhelming opponents. It's about mobility, deception, and psychological warfare, and she excels at all of it. According to historical accounts, Coutaloon personally captured enemy warriors in combat on multiple occasions. The technique of grabbing an opponent from horseback becomes associated with her specifically. Enemy soldiers begin to fear the sight of a woman warrior charging toward them because they know that if she gets close enough, they're already defeated. But here's what makes Coutaloon truly exceptional. She doesn't just fight, she protects. In one recorded incident, a portion of Kaidu's army is ambushed during a retreat. The rear guard is being cut to pieces by pursuing enemy cavalry. The situation is desperate. Men are dying. The entire army could be destroyed if the pursuit isn't stopped. Coutaloon doesn't wait for orders. She assembles every available horseman she can find, approximately 2,000 riders, and leads a countercharge directly into the pursuing force. The enemy expects a desperate, disorganized attack. What they get is a perfectly executed cavalry assault that hits them like a hammer. Coutaloon's force punches through their formation, wheels around, and attacks again from the opposite direction. The pursuing army breaks and scatters. The rear guard is saved, and Coutaloon cements her reputation as not just a warrior, but a leader who will risk everything for her soldiers. Her troops begin to call her the princess who fights like 10 men. But those who serve under her command have a different name for her. They call her the shield of the people. But all this military success created a problem that Coutaloon never anticipated. Her power was growing so vast, her legend so large, that it began to threaten the very family she fought to protect. And the conflict that emerged would force her to make an impossible choice. By 1290, Coutaloon has become the most powerful of Kaidu's children. Not because she's the eldest, not because she's male, but because she's earned it through 2 decades of unmatched military success. She commands armies, she wins battles, and most importantly, she has her father's absolute trust. Kaidu is growing old. The constant warfare against Kublai Khan has taken its toll. He needs to think about succession, about who will lead his people after he's gone. By tradition, by law, by every expectation of Mongol culture, one of his 14 sons should be his heir. But Kaidu begins to consider something radical. What if Coutaloon succeeded him instead? When whispers of this possibility begin to circulate through the court, the reaction is explosive. Coutaloon's brothers are outraged. The eldest in particular sees his birthright being stolen by his sister. Advisors warn Kaidu that naming a woman as heir could fracture his entire power base. Allied Khans send messages questioning whether they would honor agreements made with a female ruler. The pressure on Kaidu is immense, and Coutaloon watches all of this with growing concern. Because she understands something that others might miss. Her father's favor is becoming a poison. In private councils, Kaidu makes his preference clear. Coutaloon is worth any 10 of her brothers, he tells his advisors. She has proven her capability in every way that matters. Why should gender determine who leads when skill could determine it instead? But the advisors push back. The Mongol Empire has never had a female Khan, they argue. The precedent would destabilize everything. Your allies would desert you, Your enemies would see weakness. It's a trap with no good solution. If Kaidu names Coutaloon as his heir, he risks civil war among his own children and potential rebellion from his vassals. If he doesn't, he knows he's passing over the most qualified candidate simply because of tradition. And Coutaloon finds herself in an impossible position. She loves her father. She has fought beside him for 20 years. She has bled for his cause, won victories that preserved his power. But she's also watching what her success is doing to her family. Her brothers avoid her at gatherings. Whispered conversations stop when she enters a room. She can feel the resentment building like a storm. One night, Coutaloon approaches her father in private. "You must choose one of my brothers as your heir," she tells him. Kaidu looks at her with surprise and frustration. "None of them have your skills. None of them have earned what you have earned." "That doesn't matter," Coutaloon replies. "If you name me heir, this family will tear itself apart. And when you die, there will be civil war. Everything we fought for will collapse." "So you would step aside?" Kaidu asks. "You would let lesser men take power simply to avoid conflict?" And here Coutulun says something that reveals the depth of her character. "I would preserve what we've built. I would protect our people. If that means I cannot rule, then I cannot rule. But I can still serve." It's a moment of stunning selflessness. She's choosing family unity over personal ambition. She's choosing her people over her own legendary status. But Kaidu isn't ready to let it go. "I will think on this," he tells her. "Perhaps there is another way." Months pass. The succession question remains unresolved. And then something happens that changes everything. Kaidu becomes seriously ill. It's 1301. He's in his 70s, ancient by Mongol standards. Years of warfare and stress have worn him down, and now his body is finally giving out. As he lies dying, the succession crisis reaches its peak. Messengers rush between camps. Brothers position their supporters. The entire Khanate holds its breath, and Coutaloon makes a decision. She gathers her brothers together, all 14 of them, and she makes a proposal. "Our father is dying," she says. "We can either fight each other for power, destroying everything he built, or we can come together and choose a leader who can hold this Khanate together." She pauses, looking at each of them. "I propose we support our brother Horus. He is not the strongest warrior. He is not the greatest general, but he is wise, diplomatic, and fair. He can unite our family, and I will serve as his military commander, ensuring our armies remain strong." It's a masterstroke of political strategy. By voluntarily stepping aside and proposing a compromise candidate, Coutulun diffuses the succession crisis before it can become a civil war. Some brothers are suspicious, others are relieved, but ultimately they agree. When Kaidu dies shortly after, Horus becomes Khan, and Coutulun, as promised, becomes his primary military commander. She gives up the throne she could have claimed, but in doing so, she saves her father's legacy and her family's power. But here's the twist that history almost forgot. Coutulun's story doesn't end with her father's death. What she did in the years that followed would prove that she never needed a throne to change the world. After Kaidu's death, Coutulun faces renewed pressure from her family and court. "You must marry," they tell her. "You have no heirs. You are aging. The time for wrestling contests has passed." By now, Coutulun is in her 40s. She has spent more than 20 years defying expectations, building a legend that spans continents. Her collection of horses from defeated wrestlers has become so vast it's an actual economic force in the region. And she has never married. But now, with her father gone and her position secure as military commander, she makes an unexpected decision. She chooses a husband. His name is uncertain in historical records. Some sources suggest he might have been named Ghassan or Abatai. What is certain is that he is not a prince, not a great warrior, not a champion wrestler. He is a relatively ordinary man from among her father's loyal soldiers. Someone she trusts. Someone who has served loyally. Someone who, crucially, will never try to control her or diminish her power. The court is scandalized. After all these years of refusing princes and champions, after accumulating a legendary collection of horses and defeating every man who challenged her, she chooses someone completely unexpected. But this is vintage Coutaloon. She makes decisions on her own terms always. The marriage is quiet, without the ceremony one would expect for a princess of her status. And notably, Coutaloon doesn't give up her military command. She doesn't retreat into domestic life. She continues to lead armies, continues to ride into battle, continues to be the warrior she has always been. Her husband becomes something unusual in Mongol society, a man defined not by his own achievements, but by his wife's legend. And according to the limited records we have, he seems perfectly content with this arrangement. But there's a darker current running beneath this seemingly happy resolution. Whispers begin to circulate, rumors, dark accusations. Some claim that Coutaloon poisoned her father to prevent him from naming her brothers as heirs. Others suggest she killed several brothers in secret to maintain her power. Still others accuse her of practicing witchcraft, claiming that her unnatural strength and success must come from dark magic. None of these accusations are ever proven. None are based on credible evidence, but they persist in the historical record recorded by chroniclers who can't quite accept that a woman could achieve what Khutulun achieved through skill and merit alone. This is the double-edged sword of her legacy. She is so exceptional that people literally cannot believe she's real. They invent supernatural explanations. They fabricate crimes. They create narratives that make sense to their worldview, even when those narratives contradict all evidence. But Coutaloon ignores the rumors. She has more important work to do. Under her brother Oris's rule, with Coutaloon as military commander, the Khanate remains strong. She continues to lead campaigns, continues to win battles, continues to be the shield that protects her people. The historical record becomes unclear in her final years. Some sources suggest she died in battle, falling in combat like a true warrior. Others indicate she died of natural causes, surrounded by her family. The truth is lost to time. What we know for certain is this. By the time of her death, Coutaloon had served as a military commander for over 30 years. She had participated in dozens of major battles. She had personally captured enemy warriors in combat more times than could be counted. She had accumulated a fortune in horses from defeated wrestling challengers. She had influenced the succession of one of the most powerful Khanates in the Mongol Empire. And she had done all of it while being a woman in a world that insisted women couldn't do any of it. But here's where Coutulun's story takes its most intriguing turn. After her death, her legend doesn't fade. Instead, it transforms. 700 years after Coutulun's death, her story resurfaces in the most unexpected way. In the 13th century, a Venetian traveler named Marco Polo journeys through the Mongol Empire. He spends years in Kublai Khan's court, documenting everything he sees. And when he returns to Europe, he writes a book, The Travels of Marco Polo. In this book, he tells the story of a warrior princess, a woman who defeats all challengers in wrestling, a woman who rides into battle and captures enemy soldiers with her bare hands. He calls her Aigyarn, possibly a corruption of Ayurug, one of Coutulun's other names. European readers are fascinated and skeptical in equal measure. A woman warrior, defeating men in combat, commanding armies? Surely this is exaggeration. Oriental fantasy, the kind of tale travelers tell to make their journeys seem more exotic. But the story persists. In the 18th century, an Italian playwright named Carlo Gossi writes a theatrical work called Descendant. It tells the story of a Chinese princess who challenges suitors to answer riddles, executing those who fail. The princess's name, Turandot, is derived from Turandot, daughter of Turan, a reference to Central Asian origins. The story is clearly inspired by Coutulun's wrestling challenges, though transformed through centuries of retelling. Then in the early 20th century, Italian composer Giacomo Puccini adapts Gossi's play into an opera. Turandot becomes one of the most famous operas in the world. The princess's aria, in Questa Regia, is performed in opera houses from New York to Sydney. Millions of people watch this opera. They see a strong, unconquerable princess who refuses to submit to any man's authority. They hear her declare her power and independence in soaring music. And almost none of them realize they're watching a story that began with a real woman on the Mongol steppe 700 years earlier. But Coutulun's influence extends beyond opera. In Mongolia today, She is remembered as a national hero. Traditional Mongolian wrestling tournaments honor her memory. Young girls are taught her story as an example of what Mongol women can achieve. Modern scholars studying the Mongol Empire have begun to reassess her historical importance. For centuries, she was treated as a curiosity, an interesting footnote in her father's biography. But contemporary historians recognize her as a significant political and military figure in her own right. She proved that gender restrictions were cultural constructs, not natural laws. She demonstrated that women could excel in traditionally male domains when given the opportunity and training. She showed that leadership ability had nothing to do with what was between someone's legs and everything to do with what was between their ears. And she did all of this without modern feminism, without contemporary discussions of gender equality, without any of the philosophical frameworks we use today to discuss these issues. She simply did it. She became the person she was capable of becoming, regardless of what society expected. But here's the most remarkable aspect of Coutaloon's legacy. She never asked permission. She didn't petition her father to let her train as a warrior. She simply trained. She didn't request permission to refuse marriage. She simply refused. She didn't ask if she could command armies. She simply commanded. She lived by a principle that would be radical in the 13th century and remains radical today. The only permission you need to be extraordinary is your own. But there's one final twist to Coutaloon's story, one last detail that changes everything. Remember all those accusations? The whispers that she poisoned her father? The rumors of witchcraft? The suggestions that she murdered her brothers? Modern historians have investigated these claims thoroughly. They've examined the available evidence, cross-referenced sources, analyzed the political context, and here's what they've concluded. The accusations were almost certainly fabricated by later chroniclers who couldn't reconcile Coutaloon's success with their beliefs about gender. Think about it. If Coutaloon had actually poisoned her father or murdered her brothers, why would she voluntarily step aside from succession? Why would she support her brother Horus instead of seizing power herself? Why would she continue serving as a military commander rather than claiming the throne? The accusations make no sense given her actual behavior. What makes perfect sense is that male chroniclers, writing decades or centuries after her death, looked at her exceptional achievements and invented explanations that fit their worldview. She couldn't be successful because of skill, so she must have used poison. She couldn't be strong because of training, so she must have used witchcraft. The real scandal of Coutaloon's story isn't what she allegedly did. It's what people needed to believe about her to make her existence acceptable. She was so far beyond what her society believed a woman could be that they literally had to invent crimes to explain her. They couldn't just accept that she was exceptional. That possibility was more unthinkable than poison, murder, and magic. And that tells us something profound about how history is written. How many other exceptional women have been erased from history or diminished by false accusations? How many Coutaloons are lost to time because their achievements were too threatening to record accurately? We'll never know. But we know about this one. And her story survives not because people wanted to remember her, but because her achievements were too extraordinary to completely erase. She won too many battles, defeated too many champions, commanded too many soldiers, made too much impact. Even those who wanted to diminish her couldn't quite make her disappear. Coutaloon died sometime in the early 14th century. The exact date is unknown. The circumstances are unclear. Her final resting place has never been found, but her legacy endures. She proved that the only limits on human potential are the ones we accept. That tradition is just the opinion of dead people. That strength comes in forms society doesn't always recognize or value. She was a wrestler who never lost, a warrior who captured enemies with her bare hands, a commander who led 40,000 soldiers, a princess who chose her own path. And she did all of it without apology, without permission, without compromise. The Mongols had a phrase for warriors of exceptional courage and skill: Batar, hero. Coutaloon earned that title 1,000 times over. But perhaps the most fitting tribute comes from her people's oral traditions. Centuries after her death, Mongol grandmothers still tell stories to their granddaughters. Stories of a princess who was stronger than any man. a warrior who rode like thunder, a woman who proved that nothing, not tradition, not expectation, not the weight of an entire empire's assumptions, could cage a person determined to be free. They end these stories with a simple phrase: be like Coutaloon, be strong, be brave, be yourself no matter what the world says. That's her real legacy, not the battles won or the challengers defeated, but the possibility she represented, the door she kicked open for everyone who came after. Coutaloon proved something that needed proving. That is still being proven today, 700 years later. That heroism doesn't have a gender, that strength comes in many forms, and that one person, refusing to accept the world's limitations, can change what everyone believes is possible. If Coutaloon's story moved you, inspired you, or made you think differently about what's possible, do me a favor. Hit that like button. It helps more people discover these forgotten heroes. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Every week, we're uncovering stories like this. Warriors, rulers, rebels, and visionaries whose names should be legendary, but have been erased by time. And here's something I'm curious about. Drop a comment and tell me, what surprised you most about Coutaloon's story? Was it her wrestling victories? Her military command? The fact that her legend inspired one of the world's most famous operas? Or maybe you know about another forgotten hero whose story deserves to be told. Share their name in the comments. Your suggestion could become the next episode. History isn't just about the past. It's about understanding how we got here and imagining where we can go. Every forgotten hero we remember is a door that opens. Every story we tell is a possibility we reclaim. Coutaloon opened doors 700 years ago. Doors that are still opening today. Be like Coutaloon. This has been Forgotten Heroes. I'll see you in the next episode.